Julio, my friend, thank you so much for being willing to do this podcast with me today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Michael, for the invitation.
You're welcome. Well, you're one of all the people that I've had on before you are people I've known pretty well. And you and I know each other, I guess I would say fairly well, because we've had a couple really great conversations. I think we got introduced over LinkedIn somehow. I don't know. I don't think it was anybody that introduced us. I think we just reached out to each other on LinkedIn because I guess we had things in common. And that's why I've really enjoyed my conversations with you over the past couple months or so, because I feel like we do have a lot in common in what we're passionate about. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I'm excited about today.
Okay, good. Well, true to the name of the show, my new friend, we don't know where this conversation is going to go, but let's give it a go. All right?
Let's do it.
All right. I don't know where this conversation is going to go. Hi, everybody. I'm here with Julio Govreau, and Julio and I met fairly recently, not too long ago, and we've had several really terrific conversations about work, about life, about a lot of different things. So, Julio, I'm really thankful to you for coming on the show today. Thanks for being willing to let me record one of our conversations.
Thank you for this great opportunity.
You got it. You got it. So, I always like to start with a kind of a loaded question, and we'll see where we go, Julio, but what's lighting you up these days? What are you feeling passionate about, and what's something that that you really feel passionately or strongly about in your work life? It doesn't matter. So let's start there.
Absolutely. That's a great question, Michael. One of the things I really get excited about, it gives me my why I get out of bed, is any opportunities where I get to mentor someone and really relay my experiences, so that way as they do their discovery in regards to where they want to be short-term or long-term, that really engages me as an individual, and then being able to see that person head in that right direction or strategic direction in regards to what they define as success.
Yeah, I love that too. I mean, I've been called a mentor to a few people over my career, and that always makes me feel great because in my heart is to help others. And I think you probably know that about me from our several interactions that we've had so far, is like, I always love sharing, but I also love listening and guiding. And I guess that's one of the reasons I became a coach. But yeah, that mentorship is so wonderful. And I think, to be honest with you, so many people are craving it, but not a lot of people get the true form of mentorship. Do you know what I mean? Do you see that too?
Absolutely. And right now, especially, people think that, well, I don't have time for that, or I am so focused on work, that's going to take me outside from my regular schedule, or it's not really a priority. But when you sit down with someone and truly listen to them, and like you mentioned, it's confidential conversations, and you impart wisdom, and not only from the mentor to the mentee, the other way around too. I have learned a lot from very different individuals that I've been in partnerships with. So I agree with you. It is a win-win when both individuals want it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact that you talked about both ways with that.
Yes.
And also, more recently, as I've been aging, Julio, as I get older, my eyes have really been open to the power of being mentored by someone who has different or less experience than me, or younger. I'm not necessarily concerned with age and everything,
Sure.
but just as an example, I connected with another coach. He and I have like super similar philosophies. We believe in the same things. We're both out to change the world in similar ways by helping empower people to be even more brilliant and wonderful versions of themselves. And he said to me on one of the calls, well, I really kind of am looking to you as kind of a mentor. You've really helped me. And I was like, well, you know what? You've actually helped me just as much through the conversations that we've been having. So we kind of coach each other. I guess you would call it mentoring, but it is a really interesting two-way street sometime, and a lot of people don't look at it that way.
Absolutely. You'd be amazed when you create this safe space for someone to really share with you as far as their goals, challenges, whether it's work related or even outside of work. And when you see that facial expression, that body language change, and that perspective and mindset, it is so worth it, Michael. And to me, that is why I have been very focused on that. And as an HR professional, I really thrive in those kinds of conversations because I just want to see the individual reach their goal, whatever it is. Obviously, it's reciprocal because I learn from them too. But the whole thing about mentoring is that you can make it as safe and comfortable for that individual as much as they need, because again, they're not your direct report or have a specific end goal in mind with you. They just want to learn from you and vice versa. And that feeling is awesome.
Right. And that's it. I love that I use the word safe space a lot in my work as well, because one of the things that's super, super important to me, not only with coaching, it's like almost that's a given with coaching, that the space is going to be a safe space to explore and to be open and to not worry about, the emotions that come through or what you want to say. I mean, total safe space. But in my group facilitations, it's so important for me. And I've been told I do it well, which really warms my heart. But it's so important for me to set the space where people can take risks, can not be perfect, can open up about maybe, I hate the word weakness, but maybe a barrier or a blind spot or something, and hear that other people who you probably didn't think ever felt the same way has felt the same way or has good advice for that. And when you're able to create that safe space, it's like, I always say that's where the magic happens, because there's trust, there's respect. And then that often makes, and I'm sure you see this when HR is done well, a space for people to be able to express themselves and to be open and to be honest with how they're feeling and what they're seeing.
Absolutely. And I'll add another component to your great insights is I also, when I'm mentoring with someone, I start also asking them questions about their mindset. Because sometimes when we are newer to a role, we are so focused in regards to making sure that things are going according to plan. You're so focused on your first 30, 60, 90 days. And I remind folks, you know what, if you make a mistake, think of it as a development opportunity. There is no way that someone coming into a new role is going to know everything about that role, because you're going to have to learn the nuances of that organization as far as your responsibilities. I also try to incorporate that element that you're developing, whether you have 10 years experience in the industry or 30, you're going to have to learn how to do it their way, and you have a lot of experience. So I bring that into the mix when I speak with a mentee or have a mentor-mentee relationship. That's something that we also need to pay attention to.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, again, that fear of imperfection.
Yeah.
It's most people go to work every day and most people live their life every day to do well, to be a good person. People don't usually set out to make mistakes, but it happens. And especially, sometimes I coach pretty senior people who are moving from like one company to another or making kind of a shift that feels uncomfortable for them. And they are so panicked about how they're going to be perceived in the first 3, 6, 9 months. And a lot of times some of my cheerleading work for them and coaching work for them is to remember that we're all human. And is that expectation that you're giving of yourself the expectation of the people that you're going to be interacting with? Is their expectation that high of I hate the word perfection, but excellence out of the gate maybe is a better word. Benchmark that. Everybody's been in that position where they're starting something new and they don't know everything.
Exactly.
And vulnerability and not humility, vulnerability and humility come along with that.
Absolutely. And if people are able to experience you in that way, that's also another win-win, because we are never going to do everything perfectly all the time. And another aspect of mentoring too that I like to focus on is making sure you give yourself time to reflect, especially in those moments of imperfection. It's okay to sit down and say, you know what happened here? What can I do differently next time? What is it that really prevented me from being successful? And start having those discussions again in that safe space, so that way that mentee also can be kind to themselves. You have to be compassionate, because you can't be on the go all the time, and that kind of unrealistic expectation, as you mentioned, it's not good for you physically and professionally. So right. I hear you. It's just you're working yourself up, and is that worth it?
Right. Yeah. Well, and one of the things that hit my head when I was hearing you say that is about learning from mistakes, learning from failures. I just posted on LinkedIn a couple of days ago about how people see me as a risk taker because I'm an entrepreneur. I've started businesses. They've only seen the successes. They haven't necessarily, some people along my journey have seen the failures, but they haven't seen the failures. And someone recently said to me, "Oh, you're such a risk taker. I admire you." And I was kind of like, the truth is, I don't really think I'm a risk taker because it takes me a long time to make a decision to take a risk. They're very calculated, but what I'm not afraid of is to fail. I'm more afraid of the regret that comes from not trying something that I think would have helped another human.
So funny you mentioned that. I want to share a quick story with you.
Yeah.
In my first management role, I worked for a phenomenal leader, and I knew this leader outside of work. We became friends and pursued our undergraduate degree at night. It was my first manager role, and I made a mistake. It cost $25,000. And talk about not being perfect all the time. I
Right.
already had the mindset of when I came in on Monday that I had to turn in my resignation because of that mistake. So when I spoke to my manager, I handed her my resignation, and she says, "Oh, no, no, no. That was $1,000 development opportunity for you to grow."
Mm.
And after that, Michael, I went, you know what? We are going to make mistakes. Obviously, I
Mm-hmm.
failed forward. I learned from it, and we had ongoing conversations. But to have that kind of commitment from my leader, as far as when she was mentoring me throughout my career as well, that made a whole difference in regards to my perspective that it's okay to make mistakes, but you know what? There's things that you can do to prevent from doing the same mistake again, and then being in an environment where you're supported and again, transition from making a mistake, it's a development opportunity for you. And so that has stuck with me for years, and I
I
share that
love it.
story with so many folks because you are going to make mistakes, but it's not detrimental. And if you
Right.
know you're not sure about something, ask questions before it becomes something else.
Right. Yeah. Isn't it amazing how you remember that moment and you remember that story so clearly because that was a pivotal moment for you,
Hmm.
something where you learned something or you or and the light bulb went off for you. And imagine if she hadn't done that for you.
Exactly.
How long you would have carried those feelings forward
Hmm.
rather than having that support and belief and that reframe of what the mistake was. I love that. I had a boss when I was back in my financial services marketing days, and she did a very similar thing for me. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I know I screwed up. And I was really being hard on myself. And when I'm not feeling good, you can see it on my face. I
Hmm.
mean, I change. And she read that and she called me to her office, and I was like, oh boy, here it comes. And she was like, look, Michael, you screwed up. It's okay. What are we going to do different next time? And I had the answer back then to what we were going to do next time. And that's one of the lessons that I've learned a long time is like sometimes it is a lesson and you can learn very quickly from your mistake. And sometimes you just screwed up and there might not be that glowing, wonderful lesson from the mistake, but there is a lesson I've learned in how you handle it,
Oh,
what you do next
very true.
for me.
Absolutely. And interesting you mentioned that because, again, that's where that self reflection or self awareness comes in. Because, yes, you're going to make that mistake, but knowing how to have that reference point for other similar situations, you can draw upon that and say, you know what, in this situation, it's very similar. So let me change my trajectory a little bit, or let me do this additional component so that way I'm not in the same situation. That's where, right, and as we are professionals with a lot of responsibilities, taking that time to slow down and really assessing that situation will be very advantageous to us.
But what do you say to people who say, well, it's just too busy, I don't have the time?
Well, then I always challenge them, you're going to repeat the same behaviors that you repeated last time. And I always tell them, do you know what the definition of insanity is as far as trying to do the same thing over and over and expecting the different results? And you're going to get into this loop.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of courage for you, again, to sit down, or I share this concept, doing the mirror test. Did I do everything that I could have to achieve this goal or achieve this result? What can I do differently? And when you start being very realistic with yourself and those aha moments come in, I could have done this differently, or I could have asked more questions. Again, you don't want to bog yourself down with the things that didn't go well, but also saying,
Right.
okay, one little thing that I can do differently for the next time? And we owe that to ourselves as leaders, as individual contributors, or anybody else in that spectrum as well. It's just 5 minutes out of your day is not a lot of time. It's realistic. It's sometimes we have this idea that, oh, I have to take hours to reflect. You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Something as significant as 5 minutes or even 3 minutes, what's one thing I'm going to do differently? And that also conditions yourself because the way our brain is wired, we have all our neurons shooting. And then when we make those new experiences, our neurons are making those connections so that way we have that point of reference. And so I love that because, again, it's those little things that make significant impact in regards to the next opportunity.
100%. And I learned that thankfully earlier in my entrepreneurial adventure, but I've been even paying more attention to that for the past 4 or 5 years with this adventure that I'm on because I learned that for me, It's like taking a quick walk away from the screens really gives me an incredible open mindset for insight. And it can be insight to reflect on something that didn't go well. That's fine. But I've also found it's also insight for moving forward, for how to help a coachee, for how to come up with an idea for a workshop activity when I'm stuck. Yeah, AI is great. You can get ideas from there too. Even if I get ideas from AI and I'm sitting in front of my screens, it's a different, I just feel that works for me. Just get up, take a walk, and almost every time I find my solution. I get the reflection I need. I think about something for a coachee that is going to help them that I probably wouldn't have thought of if I was in front of the screens and the email and the text files and all of that kind of stuff, because it makes me more deeply rooted in thinking about them. But it really works for me.
Absolutely. And I like how you also mentioned the shift of when going from mentoring, transitioning over to coaching, because I love that there's a difference as far as when you're mentoring
Sure.
someone, you're imparting your experience, you're sharing your insights. And then if you want to hone in from some of those mentoring discussions into something very specific, behavior, mindset, all those good things, I love it that we can transition from being a mentor to a coach and really being more specific in regards to the assistance that we're providing or the value that we're providing to that individual. So it's unique to hear that, as far as some people just do it naturally and other folks are more intentional about it.
Right. Yeah. Yes, I think I'm pretty intentional about that because I know what coaching is, I know what teaching is, I know what mentoring is. Usually my clients aren't looking for a mentor, but a lot of the people I network with are, and it's easier to give advice in that setting. Whereas in the coaching setting, I'm usually trying to more help them really explore what's going on and feel more confident or solve an issue or whatever that is. But now that we're talking language, mentoring versus sponsorship,
Oh,
because you're in HR and I know you probably had conversations around mentoring versus sponsorship. Tell me your thoughts on that, because like I've had a couple people on my other podcasts who've talked about the importance of sponsorship. I don't wouldn't say I've ever had, well, maybe that's not true. I don't know if I've ever had a sponsor, but talk about, because I know in one of our past conversations you brought that up. But so talk about sponsorship and how you see that being a useful tool or a useful thing in someone's development.
absolutely. So I've been very fortunate that I've been on boards for the past 22 and a half years, and I've been able to interact with phenomenal talent over the years. And I've been a sponsor to some of them because I either work with them in the same organization or we volunteered in a local nonprofit or community-based organization. Sponsorship to me is an individual who has a lot of influence and can speak very accurately about the work and the value you bring to the organization. Those conversations are happening behind closed doors, either informally or formally, and that way people know of you. And so that's when those profiles, they align with you as far as sponsorship in regards to an individual knowing your performance or your talent and where you want to go with your career too. I also think that sponsorships also need to be aligned with leadership development programs, with mentorships, coaches, and sponsorship. Because when you hear the word sponsorship, typically it's at a higher level as far as VPs or executive or C-suite individuals that are part of a succession plan, and then that sponsor can speak to them when they're having calibration discussions or talking to the CEO or board of directors. Not everybody has access to a sponsor.
Right.
And I think that a sponsor would be a phenomenal element to add at the individual contributor level all the way up to senior executive leadership development programs. And that way, again, there's that identification of mentorship, coaching that can be brought in, and then sponsorship. Think of that as the last stop on the continuum, so that way people can connect with someone safely with a mentoring relationship, can get coached as far as very specific aspects of the program or their performance, and then sponsorship is that icing on the cake as far as, Julio has done a phenomenal job with these projects. His career track is what we have planned for him. He matches up with all these other things that we're looking for, and I want to see him grow. When you have that kind of attention and sponsorship and support, sky's the limit as far as what that employee can do.
Yeah, and I like how you talk about that continue. Like what I was hearing in there a little bit, these are my own words, is that, these types of things can start earlier than when they're about to become a senior leader or are a senior leader on the executive level. And I see that a lot in my work too, Julio, where a lot of times I'm brought in to help the most senior people, which is wonderful. I love that work. I really do. But boy, How powerful would it be to be coaching the high potential people who aren't going to be there for a few years to really set them up for success? You
Absolutely.
know?
And you think about it too, when you look at your individual contributor workforce populations, your supervisors, your managers, these are the biggest populations in your organization. This is where organizations can really benefit from having mentors, coaches, and sponsors, because when you look at the demographics, once you hit VP or higher, that's a pretty small group of the organization. But when
Yeah.
you have 80% of your workforce and you devote and support them with these kinds of resources, oh my gosh, talk about succession planning very early on to making sure that these folks not only engage, but they see opportunities for lateral moves or vertical moves. And that would be very engaging for me as an employee in that kind of organization.
Yeah. Succession planning, retention, workplace satisfaction, all of
Absolutely.
that is affected by offering things like that and taking care of people in that way.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it's amazing because you mentioned succession planning. I have a colleague and good friend who that's one of the things she does in her work. And when I talk to her about that and she's doing these succession strategies, it shocks me how many organizations really don't have a true plan in place or a true development plan for the people that they're hoping will be part of that team when the time comes. It's really amazing that's how much of a gap there is out there in corporate and in organizations.
Absolutely. And you also throw this into the mix as well. Sometimes we have too much time that passes by before we even start these processes for those talented folks. I always tell people succession planning should start as soon as you start interviewing an individual, because you're going to learn about their interests, their short-term goals, their long-term aspirations. And especially when they start going through the interview process and doing onboarding, this is where you provide a lot of information so that way that person stays engaged as far as what does my department look like as far as career track, supervisor, manager, director role, so that way they see a path moving forward. Having those engaging one-on-one conversations as far as Julio, what's your interest as far as your current role and what do you want to do long term?
Yeah.
You'd be surprised that those conversations aren't happening. And I tell folks, why do we have to wait until we have a formal process in place to know that Julio wants to be a director in this department?
Yeah.
So the sooner we start engaging the individual, when you have an engaged individual, discretionary efforts go through the roof as far as I see a future here. And the sooner you can start that process, I think the better off everybody will be.
Oh my gosh, you are making me look back on my career and how much that didn't happen to me. I think one of the reasons I became self-employed was because that wasn't happening to me. I'll tell you, I was a high school teacher at first. That was a whole different environment, not right for me. But when I got into financial services marketing, the second job I had was at a broker-dealer and a insurance company. And the job I wasn't happy in the job, okay? It wasn't horrible. It was a
Sure.
great company, wonderful company. Job wasn't right for me, all right? But my two bosses, my immediate boss and his boss, which was the woman who helped me understand about how to get through screwing up, okay? Those two people made me feel so valuable and that they were so willing to be invested in me. And I was like 25, 26 years old, maybe 27. I don't know. It's a long time ago. But I remember, and it was so hard for me to leave them, even though I had to go because it wasn't right, because they did that for me. They showed me the path they saw for me. They showed me how they were willing to invest in me. And I went to one other job, one other company after that, which was a job that was perfect for me. And I loved it. And it got me the experience I needed in healthcare and biotech, which is where a lot of my clients are today. So super thankful for it. But that element wasn't there. It's interesting. It was more of a job,
Absolutely. And the other thing too that I'm loving with this conversation is we also think, how can I bring my authentic self to these kinds of environments or cultures? And that's where you start doing your research as far as, are there any employee resource groups, affinity groups, or business resource groups? Have they been publicly acknowledged as far as the organization as a best place to work? When you start seeing all of that, there's a future for me here, because typically research shows when these kinds of acknowledgments are happening, they already have a lot of processes in place so they can develop their folks, keep them engaged, because when you have an engaged workforce, they produce.
Super, 100%. Yeah.
That's one of the things that I find very important when I start researching an organization. Go right away to their website, look at their values, see if they align with mine as well. And if they have ERGs, what other opportunities? And you're starting to see more and more organizations post career paths in their websites, which I think is great. Because then that
Yeah.
gives me an idea. And I'll give you a quick for instance. I used to work for a large insurance carrier, and I started off in claims and then went over to underwriting. I wanted to learn the operation side for the organization. I saw my career path in both divisions, and I was able to assume different levels of responsibility before I transitioned over to HR. But knowing that ahead of time, that's what motivated me to apply for several roles within the organization.
Yeah.
And it was very encouraging. Imagine if everybody had that kind of experience, so that way, you know what, I'm going to do this for a little bit, but I'm going to do informational sessions, and they're welcome, and I'm going to have opportunities for my short-term and long-term. When you have that kind of culture and environment, you can do anything you like.
Yeah, whether you follow that path that was laid out in that potential thing, but still that's permission to know that you can grow, or know that there's a path, and know that the organization supports that in you, which is wonderful. Hey, how did you get involved in it? I never asked you before in our conversation. How did you get into HR? What was your path to that?
So I was very lucky. I actually stumbled into HR by accident at 18. When I was getting ready to graduate from high school, I started exploring my options as far as going to college or entering the workforce. I spoke to my parents and I said, there's going to be military recruiters coming to our high school, to my high school. And my parents and myself, we went. I spoke to the Marine Corps, a recruiter, and I asked him, are there any roles where I can combine my love of music and recruiting? Because I love to talk to people. And he said, let's talk about that. So I joined the Marine Corps and was a member of the Quantico Marine Band. I was a flute and piccolo player in one of their field bands. And it was phenomenal, Michael. I was able to talk to people from all over the country, specifically on the East Coast. And it was phenomenal. That's where I really started honing in on my HR administrative career. And while serving my country, it was a win-win. And at 18 years old, it was a great life experience. And as a result of that, it put me in line with being an HR professional in multiple industries, and now I have over 25 years of experience.
Yeah, great. How long were you in the military for?
I did a tour 4 years. So
4 years, okay.
Yes, it was wonderful.
Yeah. I didn't know you were a musician. See, I'm finding something else about you. We share that.
Yes.
So flute and piccolo, do you still play at all?
I do. I'm a member of a local community orchestra, so I play on occasion based on my school schedule, but I loved it. I played every John Philip Sousa march there is, so and it's been a great experience.
That's great. Do you like music in general as well, or are you someone
absolutely.
who, yeah,
All
music's a
kinds
big
of
part of
music.
your life? Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Me too. I grew up in a house where music was always on, and my dad was a big opera fan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I tried to be an actor before I became who I am today. But yeah, theater and music and the arts were always part of the house, as well as every sport imaginable, because I have 3 brothers. So, but it was interesting, and I'm so thankful that was part of my upbringing, because music's still a big part of my life. I play the piano. I like to play the piano, especially when people like to hang around and sing, even though, sometimes we sound horrible, but we have a lot of fun. Doesn't matter. But yeah, I come from a pretty musical family, which is fun. So cool. I'm glad we have that in common. We'll have to talk more about that in a future chat.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to hear more. So definitely. Cool. Well, listen, I have one final question for you, and it's a question I ask every person who's on this podcast. And let me phrase it. I'll just phrase it the same way I usually do, and you can take it where you want to. So what's something you know now that you wish you knew then? It can be life, business, doesn't matter. But what's something you know now as the person you are today that you wish you knew back?
That's a great question, Michael. I would say I am more in tune with my self-esteem and self-confidence as a professional, being that I've been in multiple industries for several decades. I wish I would have known more about that when I was younger, because when you know that you have value for yourself and that radiates outward, or you project that as far as adding value to someone else or an organization, that's pretty big. And as an 18-year-old, I wish I had that kind of insights joining the Marine Corps, because I was this very introverted, shy kid going into a global organization, and here I was, but I quickly learned how to adapt to my environment. I would say to folks, remind yourself that you do have a lot to offer, and remind yourself that with all of your experience, who you are as a person as a professional, that's a great balance to offer somebody else as far as what you're seeking, whether it's a role or being in a volunteer opportunity in an organization, self-awareness is huge, and self-esteem has been very helpful to me over my career.
I love that, Julio, because you're speaking directly to, especially to a lot of what I do in my work when I work on leadership presence and executive presence with folks. So often what I see is that the leaders that they think they're supposed to be because of what they've been told or what they've seen or the feedback that they've gotten, they've lost who they are and how that comes into play in the formula of who you are as a leader. And that comes from self-esteem. It comes from kind of what you just said, like allowing yourself to be more you. Like you said, you were an introverted shy kid, okay?
Oh,
I'm an introvert. I know how to be an extrovert when I need to because I have to do that in order to help people, you know, when I facilitate and all of that. But there's nothing wrong with being quiet. There's nothing wrong with being introverted. And I wish workplaces created spaces more equitably for people across that spectrum, because I was just talking to a friend about this the other day. Sorry, I'm riffing off this, but you're just making me think. I was talking to a friend the other day who's also in HR. And I said to him, you know, if you knew the 22 to 35-year-old me, I wouldn't be the one speaking up in the meeting. I'd be the one listening, processing, coming up with what I thought was a brilliant idea or a solution and emailing it to you afterward. If you don't find that valuable, and some people didn't when I was younger, guess what happened? I stopped doing it. So then I was just the quiet one.
Absolutely. And we fall into these labels, and then people have this perception, what value does this person have, especially if they're not interacting with others? And so I've learned over the years, well, you can have a mixture of both things here, and especially when there's opportunities to speak up, but then there's also a lot of value when you just listen and then provide insight after the fact or during the interaction. But there is not one set of personality traits as far as being successful when it comes to leadership. And so we have to keep in mind, too, our workforce is getting more diverse as we speak. And now we have multiple generations in organizations. And it's like not everybody communicates the same way. So we have to keep that in mind, too.
We have to keep that in mind. Sometimes we do, as introverts, have to push ourselves a smidgen so our volume is high enough so we're not overlooked. But we all have to work together to create these spaces of respect for each other and our strengths and our talents.
I would agree.
So, yeah, awesome. Well, Julio, thanks so much for coming on today. I appreciate it. This was a great conversation. I want to give you a minute to tell folks how they can find out about you if you'd like to.
Oh, absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn, so you're more than welcome to connect with me, Julio C. Govreau. You'll be able to find me. And I like to stay pretty active on that platform, and I love to learn more about people and their industry, so I welcome the opportunity to connect with you.
Awesome. Appreciate that. And thank you so much for coming on today, Julio. It was a great chat.
Thank you for the opportunity, Michael.
You got it.
Take care.
Thanks for listening today. If you like the show, please rate it on your favorite podcast platform. To learn more about your host, that's me, Michael Piperno, please visit my website at michaelpiperno.com. That website's in the show notes. See you next time.